Good evening and welcome to tonight's webinar of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated Hope Health Ministry. We certainly hope that those around the country who are experiencing inclement weather are staying safe and warm. We now present kickoff Sister Lottie Minor, who will take us further.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening. Welcome to our webinar tonight. We are so glad that you are able to be with us. We're going to be talking tonight about a topic that's quite important. And I think, unfortunately, lately we have had so much political talk and so much pandemic talk that we have not talked about this as much as we should. And our topic tonight is HIV and AIDS in the South. And our emphasis is going to be on the greater Memphis, Tennessee, or the Mid-South area. Sometimes we call it the state area. That is going to be our topic. Again, we welcome you. We are so happy that our Facebook family is here, our YouTube viewing family, and of course, all of our folks who are watching with us via Zoom. Welcome, welcome. We want to acknowledge our leadership for the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. We would be remiss if we did not mention our president, Dr. Jerry Young, who reminds us to envision the future exceptionally. We also want to acknowledge our leadership for the Hope Health Ministry. Dr. Alvin Love, the chair of the Federal Faith-Based Development Initiative. Dr. Michael Minor, National Director of the NBC USA Liaison to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Again, welcome. All right, tonight we'll be talking again about HIV and AIDS in the South, particularly in the Memphis Metro Mid-South area. We have with us Dr. Latrice Pichon. We have Andrea Stubbs with us, and we have Ms. Bettina Campbell, who works with our Hope Ministry. She is the coordinator of our National Mental Health Initiative for the National Baptist Convention USA, and our A Better Way coordinator as well. So we're going to move right into our program for tonight. I'm going to bring up Ms. Campbell, who is going to, I believe, introduce further Dr. Pichon and Ms. Stubbs, and then we'll move on to the discussion.
Thank you for that introduction. I guess I'm going to wing it tonight in terms of these introductions because I don't have their bios in front of me. But you know, I know these.
Apologize.
No problem.
I missed it. I will gladly do that for you. You're a member of our team, and we want you to really get into the brass tacks, these ladies. Okay. So I can do the introductions. I do have it in front of me. That was my error. All righty. I apologize, ladies, but here we go. We first want to bring to you Miss Andrea Stubbs. I see that Andrea has her up, so I'm going to go ahead first so you can see her. Andrea is, has a wide range of community-based experience, has fueled her focus on disease prevention and management within disparate and minority communities. She began her career as a public health advocate for chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease. With HIV being as bad or worse in some communities as other diseases, she transitioned HIV care prevention in 2011. Oversees HIV community program at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and directs the implementation of therapeutic behavioral intervention in hard-to-reach communities in the Memphis metropolitan statistical area. And you all know we have a lot to reach this just in Memphis, even looking at the surrounding areas. It's also the coordinator for the Protect HIV Commission, which drives the Ending the HIV Epidemic initiative in Memphis. Thank you so much for being with us, Andrea. We're going to move on to Dr. Latrice Pichon. And I want to go ahead and bring her.
She's unable to be on camera.
Okay. I want to at least bring her picture up if I can. Andrea, I know you're wondering why I still have your face up in the camera. I am sorry. Let me pull up Dr. Pichon if I can, at least to bring her picture up. Okay, it is not allowing me to bring her up, but I'll read the introduction. Dr. Latrice Pichon is an associate professor in the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Memphis School of Public Health. She received postdoctoral training in the application of community participatory research approaches in the Kellogg Health Scholars Program at the University of Michigan School of Public Health. She was selected for the Visiting Assistant Professor Program at the Center for AIDS Prevention Studies at the University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Pichon's current research focuses on the evaluation of the PrEP, P-R-E-P, PrEP program, the PrEP uptake among Black men who have sex with men and Black transgender women. She is also implementing a photo voice intervention addressing internalized HIV stigma. And we know that in our community, the community of folks who look like us, there are so many stigmas that we must overcome to achieve a culture of health. Collectively, Dr. Pichon and other community partners from Connect to Protect Memphis, Headliners, and Memphis Ryan White HIV Care and Prevention Committee are working toward developing a plan to end the HIV epidemic in Memphis. All right, thank you, ladies. These are two subject matter experts. And then, of course, we have our in-house subject matter expert, Sister Bettina Campbell, who is, as I mentioned earlier, a member of our HOPE team. So we're going to now bring up Ms. Campbell, who is going to take us further in our discussion tonight.
Again, thank you, Sister Minor. And I will give a little correction here. We got a late breaking information about Miss Stubbs, Andrea. I can't call you Miss Stubbs. I have to call you Andrea. Andrea has no longer working directly with the HIV, but now she is the administrator for what is, Andrea, give us your new title.
I'm the administrative director for a newly formed division at St. Jude. It's the H.P.E Cancer Prevention Program.
All right, H.P.V Cancer Prevention Program, yet still working with sexually transmitted infections. So I guess that has been her ministry from God.
I go wherever he says go. How about that?
Right. And with Dr. Pichon Latrice, I first met her when she was doing her Kellogg's fellowship, and she came to work with me at your center and helped to develop an HIV faith-based program. So again, ladies, welcome to our show. These two ladies have become very dear to me, and they have a wide range of experience, and they are deeply committed to wanting to end HIV, not only in Memphis, but in the United States and across the world. So even though Andrea is no longer working directly with us, I'm sure from time to time, we will be drawing on that vast amount of experience she has in this area. So without further ado, I'm going to ask them if they would pull up their presentation and begin. And while they're doing that, let me encourage you at home to get out your paper, your pencils, or put your questions in chat, because I'm sure that since we have these experts with us, you're going to want to ask them some important questions. So ladies. Dr. Pichon. Are you muted?
While the ladies are working on pulling up their presentation, again, we want to acknowledge that this is a production of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated Hope Health Ministry. We are a team of individuals committed to helping the National Baptist constituents, the members of our churches become the healthiest denomination, the healthiest major denomination. Our president is Dr. Jerry Young. Our general secretary, Dr. Alvin Edwards. Our chair of the Federal Faith-Based Initiative, Dr. Alvin Love. And our director of the NBC USA Incorporated Hope Health Initiative, also our HHS liaison is Dr. Michael Miner. Again, we're happy to have Ms. Andrea Stubbs and Dr. Latrice Pichon. Our moderator is Ms. Bettina Campbell. Ladies, are you ready now? All right.
I still don't think we can hear Dr. Pichon.
Cannot.
So I know she did the sound check and everything was just fine. So
Sister
Latrice, we
Minor,
still can't hear you.
let me ask
Dr.
you, is she
Pichon's
using-
microphone is not on. Turn your mic on, Dr. Pichon. Audio not connected. While we're waiting for her to connect her audio, Sister Campbell, tell us a little bit about how you got involved. You mentioned your center before, and we may have some viewers who have not viewed with NBC before. So tell us a little bit about what your center is and how you got involved in something that has I think has become your passion over 20 some odd years.
Well, my church in Flint, Michigan, was Metropolitan Baptist Tabernacle, and we had been given a building by a doctor who was retiring, and my pastor wanted to start a social service agency out of that building, and I was already working in the field of HIV, and so the agency that I worked with, Wellness Aid Services and Metropolitan, formed a joint venture to open a clinic on the north end of Flint, so that people, African-American people in particular, who were being diagnosed with HIV that did not want to come to wellness because it was perceived as a gay white male agency, perhaps would come to your center to receive services. And so in 1996, we opened the door. As you say, it has become a passion for me because originally it certainly was not a field that I thought that I would be in for over 30 years. But as I began to work with the clients and they began to share their stories with me, something resonated with me. And one of the things that I feared most when I went to work in this field was what my pastor would say and what the faith community would say. And so I went and sat down and I had a talk with my pastor, and I explained to him the population that I'm going to be working with is going to be very different from what we presume to be the population that's coming up in church, when in reality, they are all in church. Many of them are in our churches. And so I have come to decide, Pastor, that in order to work with them, I have to realize that before we can save a soul, we have to save a life. And when these people are hurting with all different illnesses and HIV being layered on top of that, and the social ills that they're dealing with, I feel that God is calling me to this ministry, and this is what I want to do. And to my surprise, my wonderful surprise, he was open and he became actively involved and began to recruit other pastors to become involved with me. So that's how I came to work in the field of HIV.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that story. Nothing happens by mistake. I think it maybe needed to be while we're giving these ladies time to get the presentation going. And we ask our viewers to just be
Can you all
patient.
hear me now?
Yes, we
You,
can.
Dr. Bishop. Thank
Perfect.
you so much. Okay, it's back in your hands.
Okay, can you all see the slides without the
Yes,
notes?
ma'am. We can. We can
Perfect.
see the slides beautifully.
We would like to again thank you all for the invitation to speak tonight on the topic of HIV/AIDS in the South with an emphasis on the greater Memphis metropolitan area. And this topic is timely because the former administration, in partnership with other federal agencies, came up with this goal to reduce the number of new HIV infections by the year 2030. And so what we did locally is our HIV Community Coalition in Memphis collaborated with several community agencies, including our local public health department, the Shelby County Health Department, local public school system, and federally qualified clinics and other community-based organizations to develop this plan for Memphis on how we can address this HIV epidemic locally. And we just launched a website, and we can put that in the chat box shortly after our presentation, where you can view to learn more about those findings and what we're going to be doing and implementing in our city in the coming year. So this national initiative is broken down by pillars. So there's 4 pillars. The first pillar was to expand HIV testing locally. And so earlier in my career, in academic career, we did some non-traditional testing in transitional housing facilities. And so now we'd like to continue to expand how we do testing and to also include faith-based organizations such as churches. The second pillar is related to testing. Those who have a positive test result, we would like to get them in care immediately to reach viral suppression. So this is where an individual is undetectable, meaning that they cannot transmit HIV to their partner. Well, you may have seen this. There are campaigns that talk about U equals U that the CDC has put out there, and that is related to being undetectable, untransmittable. The third pillar comes in 2 forms. It's about prevention. So the first part that I'll talk about are mobile syringe service programs, and the other is PrEP. So PrEP is a HIV prevention tool that you can take. It's a pill similar to birth control that you can take daily to prevent HIV infection. And so the last pillar of this initiative is related to how we respond to outbreaks in our community. And not too long ago in Indiana, there was an outbreak, and they hadn't had an outbreak in HIV in a very long time. And so it's related to how these small clusters of people may become infected and then subsequently infecting other people. I hope that kind of provides some clarity on what that means. So this slide here, or what I'm going to be talking about now, is just what the epidemic looks like, particularly in Memphis. But before I do that, I want to just talk about how the Deep South, which is where Memphis is located or Tennessee is located, includes 9 southern states. And all 9 of these southern states, like Louisiana, Texas, Georgia, are driving the HIV epidemic. And so the Memphis metropolitan area, that includes counties in Tipton and Fayette in Tennessee, as well as northern counties of Mississippi, not far from where the Hill Hernando Baptist Church is, and Eastern County, Arkansas. So these data that I'm going to be presenting in the next few slides are from the HIV surveillance report that the CDC puts out, and it talks about the number of people that are living with HIV as well as the new cases for HIV. And we're going to focus specifically on the Memphis metro area. And for Memphis, the newer cases for people that are living with HIV or recently diagnosed from the ages of 13 to up to 60 plus in 2018 was about 367 people. So that is the left column of this table. Okay. And I just wanted to also mention that while this is older data, that to the right, this map, it shows you that the burden is specifically in Shelby County, where Memphis is located. We also have data that is broken down or specifically focusing on other important areas, including the distribution by different age groups, sexuality, or risk behaviors. And so what I'd like to say here is that, again, I hope that this is advancing. Can you guys see this okay? I hope
Yes.
so. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So the breakdown as far as disparities in gender, we see that mostly men are affected with the new cases of HIV in our metro area. And then when we move to age groups, we see that our younger age groups between the ages of 15 to 34, but specifically 15 to 24, and then the next breakdown is between 25 to 34. Those are the groups where our burden is significant in terms of new infections in our city. Again, when we talk about disparities and equity, the breakdown as far as race is concerned, you can see from this table that the majority of our cases are among non-Hispanic Black individuals in the Memphis metro area. As far as transmission, so this is where we're talking about risk of infection. Newer cases are primarily occurring among male-to-male sexual contact. And then the next and very important group would be heterosexual contact. And you'll see that we had 30 new cases in the year 2018. In terms of transmission risk among transgender populations, we know that one, collecting data among this group is very difficult because we don't have a high enough case count in our local area. And so some of these numbers may be off, but for the most part, from what we can tell from the data, is transmission can occur with any type of sexual contact among our transgender community. So now I want to talk a little bit, now that we kind of have a picture of the landscape of what the data is looking like in our community, I want to focus on how we took those data to begin to inform the kind of programs or projects that we will implement in our community to try to address the epidemic. And so before I started my faculty appointment, I had the pleasure of working with Ms. Bettina at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, like she mentioned earlier. And this kind of gave me the knowledge and tools to move forward and work in Memphis, where I am conducting community engaged research. And the University of Memphis subscribes to interdisciplinary work where we try to focus on health equity. We work closely with communities and academic researchers, and we form these partnerships to do research where we kind of take those data and the programs that we do and we translate those findings from our research into community practice. So what that means is basically how we implement programs, whether they be in hospitals, clinics, in churches, in schools, we work together collectively. And so one of our groups that we are working very closely with is the Headliners Community Advisory Board. And they were initially established to work in the community to connect groups that were particularly at risk for acquiring HIV, and also groups that could benefit from prevention and testing through these innovative parties and other community outreach efforts to increase participation in some of our clinical trials, as well as other programming and interventions in the community. And I think many of you are hearing a lot about right now about COVID clinical trials And so it's very similar in the HIV world where we are looking for participants to be enrolled into those projects. And also the other very important group, which is spearheading the ending the epidemic, which I talked about earlier, and addressing those 4 pillars, is our larger community coalition, which Andrea leads or was leading up until she transitioned to her new position, called Connect to Protect. So you may be wondering, well, what is a headliner? So a headliner is described as the principal performer in a show, the person that's commonly referred to as a star and has the personality. They draw people in. And as community leaders in public health, they serve in the sphere of being an influencer. So headliners recognize the power to help and guide people down the right path using creative, culturally relevant, performance-based messaging. And so, like I said, this group of individuals assisted with identifying HIV testing services, as well as barriers to testing high-risk youth that could potentially benefit from some of our programming. So now I want to talk a little bit about the project, or the project will come next, but I want to talk about the funding agency. And for those of you that are in other places or that are working in the South, this may be a potential opportunity for you to secure funds to conduct work of your own. And so we are a Compass initiative, or a grantee from the Compass initiative. And so in 2017, Gilead, the pharmaceutical company, launched the Compass initiative. And what Compass stands for is Commitment to Partnership in Addressing HIV/AIDS in the Southern States. So this project is supported from a $100 million partnership to work with communities in the South to address internalized stigma, advocacy, and other important elements around trauma and informed care. And so this is a 10-year funding opportunity. And so they recently sent out an announcement that I got, I think, yesterday, where they're now going to also expand some of these funding opportunities to other surrounding states like Kentucky. So the way that this project was conceptualized is we work very closely with the headliners that were providing these spaces for Black men who have sex with men and trans women who had revealed that they wanted or needed spaces to talk about the way that they interface the healthcare system, but also some of the challenges that come about with dealing with stigma. And so what we know is that when you are experiencing stigma from a healthcare perspective or in a healthcare setting from medical providers, that creates a barrier for you maintaining medical care or seeking prevention services. And so this project was conceptualized anecdotally from some of the stories that we were hearing and listening to our community partners from some of the work that we were doing and engaging one another in the community. So we conceptualized the project using Photo Voice, which was going to focus on the impact of stigma and spirituality on people living with HIV. And this, as I want to mention, is a huge need in most Southern states. Stigma affects a lot of different populations, but particularly our young Black males in our communities. And so what we wanted to do is understand how, when stigma is internalized among people living with HIV, how we can begin to understand how to improve the management and resistance to the way that they may feel from being subjected by church members, as well as healthcare providers, or even families. And so the utility of Photo Voice allowed for us to create this supportive anti-stigma environment for people living with HIV. And so what happened? Well, we had 3 different sessions for this project. The first session was an orientation. And so at that point, we talked a little bit about what the expectations were for people that were going to be participating in our project. We had 47 people living with HIV come to that session. We issued each person a camera, which they were able to keep. And we collected basic demographic information, but we also administered a survey to gather some of those numbers that we oftentimes need to kind of describe what's going on. And those numbers were related to stigma. We wanted to understand or have a better understanding of what they were experiencing in their day-to-day lives. The second session was a group session, and 35 people actually returned, and they also returned for the third session. So in the second group session, they were instructed in the first session, I should say, to come back to the second session with photos. We only were really expecting for people to come back with maybe 3 or 4 photos. We had people that were so enthusiastic about this project that they came back with like 50 pictures, and we had group discussions to talk about the photos that they took, which Andrea will share later. But we also had these conversations in a group format that created a safe environment for people to talk about, their challenges and what it feels like to be living with stigma. With HIV, and how to manage stigma when it's coming from many different directions. The third session were individual interviews. And this is where we were able to have a conversation between Andrea, myself, and the participant. And we went deeper into some of the experiences that our participants wanted to share related to stigma. The last thing that is related to our project is our church exhibit. And this was not required by program participants, but we were able to display some of the settings, which Andrea will share momentarily, in the community, as well as at church events at the Women and Girls Conference that was hosted in March last year, as well as National Black HIV Awareness Day, which we went to the Hill Hernando Baptist Church to display, and we did a presentation that day. But we also went to the community, to the local health department, as well as to the World AIDS Day annual event down at the Beale Street Landing to share the church exhibit, the exhibit of the photos that which we had also displayed in the churches. And so now I'm going to pass the mic to Andrea. And Andrea, you will let me know when to proceed. And if I need to make any changes on my end, please let me know.
Okay, I'll just say next slide. So I'll spend the next few minutes just talking about the project itself, and then showing you some of the outcomes of the project. And as Ms. Bettina said and Latrice said, I did oversee the ending the HIV epidemic process for Memphis and Shelby County. And a few of the strategies from the EHE plan suggested that working with faith-based organizations would be very beneficial to helping to reduce the HIV burden in the community. We understand and we recognize that the faith-based community is said to be the nucleus of many families impacted with the HIV epidemic in Memphis, and there is a need for prevention messages and stigma elimination messages and overall care and treatment messages to be shared amongst this group. However, we do not expect for communities of faith to express and or share the message in the same manner that an aid service organization might. And so having these messages will help us to sort of have an understanding of these messages will help us to gain a better sense of how best to support folks who are infected with HIV. Once their capacity is built, how can we really support them as a community of faith? So this project mobilized people with HIV and faith leaders in HIV prevention and care by addressing the role of the church in promoting and creating less stigmatized environments. Next slide, please. As Dr. Pichon said, photo voice is a photographic technique based on active participation. It has been used to effectively conduct participatory needs assessments, and furthermore, it has the potential to allow the researchers to understand how the target population perceives the world using visual images that they select themselves. Next slide, please. According to Wang and Burr, as to researchers, the three main goals of photo voice are to enable people to record and reflect their community strengths and concerns, also to promote critical dialogue and knowledge about the important issues through large and small group discussions of using their photographs, and also to use these photos to hopefully reach policymakers to impact true structural level changes. Next slide, please. So when we originally conceptualized the project, we thought to focus on our youth and young adult population just because we had strong inroads to that community. However, when participants began to show interest, we quickly learned how important it was to being a more inclusive project to revise our criteria for participation. And so at the conclusion of the study, we had 35 people living with HIV who self-identified as same gender loving. We had 18 who were same gender loving, 13 identified as people of trans experience, and there were two others that identified as, I'm sorry, 15 identified as people in trans experience, and two did not identify as one of the other categories. The ages range from 16 to 73 years old, and about 66% self-identified as Christian, and nearly 40% said that they attended church or a place of worship on a weekly basis. Next slide, please. And so here's we had, like Dr. Bichon said, we had so many pictures to choose from, so many participants who wanted to share their hearts and just how they had felt stigmatized and what they wanted to share with the world. And so we've just pulled out about 5 of them to share with you tonight. And here's one of the participants of the project. He talked about his commitment to his church and how he wanted to provide education to his pastor and to the congregation about HIV. He has made educating his faith-based institution and other faith-based institutions his life's mantra. His pictures reflect that it's not always easy, but certainly worth trying to change the perceptions that exist around those who are HIV positive or living with HIV. He strongly believes in using his own personal face and story to help reduce negative perceptions about people living with HIV. Next slide, please. This participant was proud to be an outspoken advocate for people with HIV. He said that he has often been made to feel he was trash because of his diagnosis, but said it took time, and after some education and learning by the people that go to his church, he believes there is potential for growth, but he is not sure he will see what he feels is needed to happen within faith communities in his lifetime. And so these photos, these photo voice projects have been, as Dr. Bashan said, in rotation at different faith-based institutions, as well as in the general community as a whole. And it was very well perceived, and especially from those who participated, they felt a sense of relief to be able to go and find pictures that showcased how they felt inside about having this diagnosis, and how interacting with people, especially in communities of faith, sort of made them feel, and how they were. Many of them were on the road to recovery from some of the trauma they had experienced, but many of them also had very positive outlooks on life and just living as a person who is HIV positive. I received a text from one of them, one of the participants not long ago, just checking in about the project and expressing great joy for their participation in the project, and looking forward to when the world will open back up so that we can go out and do more displaying. Next slide, please. And this particular slide is this story has stuck with me since we interviewed this participant on a very, very cold, cold day, similar to where we are now about a year ago. He was a very quiet man, and throughout many of the sessions, and when he brought his photos to share, he talked about the trauma related to some of his church experiences. And he said when he was small, all they did was stay in church from sunup to sundown. And that's where he was supposed to have been protected, but he was not protected. He was actually abused. And he said that it still bothers him to this day. And his stigma was internalized as a child. And it really set him on a path of failed attempts in his life to really thrive like he could have. And he has been working very hard on himself over the last years, and shared a picture of this tree. And he says that that tree represents his life within himself. He says, I branched out, even though I had had hard conflicts, but I still branched out. I bloomed and I blossomed no matter what. Next slide, please. And here, this participant had a very positive outlook, very comfortable with his diagnosis. And he says he wants a future without stigma, and he wants people with HIV to feel encouraged, to keep fighting to live and also to thrive. He acknowledged that not everyone is welcoming and open to acceptance, but he challenged the viewers with a statement. What would MLK do? We all know Martin Luther King to be a great civil rights icon who accepted all people, no matter the race, the color, or the creed. And this particular participant said that we should follow that motto and accept all people, no matter their diagnosis or even some of their life choices. But we are all loved and appreciated by God. Next slide, please. Um, so this particular participant was, and you can read the caption or the title of the slides. It says basically, I want them to lay hands on me too. And that was very powerful because if you can follow some of the text, he says that his personal church does a lot of praying for people in the church that have cancer and other diseases, he expressed. And he said he felt like if he told them that he had HIV, it wouldn't be the same prayer. It would be a prayer, but it would be a little bit different. And he said, you know what I mean? And so we talked through that, we sifted through that, and he basically said that, you know, certain diseases are accepted. People feel comfortable talking about them and asking for prayer to be healed, to be delivered. But for something like HIV, he would not feel comfortable, and he does not believe that the same level of empathy would be given for him sharing that with the church. And so he shared these pictures to really express he wants for people to, especially in the church, to lay hands on him too. Next slide, please. And so participant discussions of stigma uncovered how, you know, support was a complex issue in their lives and how it came at a cost. For example, participants identified, you know, 4 common areas in which support sort of overlaid with stigma and complicated their use and access to external and as well as internal resources. And these 4 themes that emerge basically describes medical care as a support and stigma. There's also social support. There's also at church support. And I'll just take a few moments to hit a few high points that came out of about each of these themes from some of the interviews and discussions that we had with participants. Next slide, please. And so, in general, people living with HIV, um, they basically understand that it's no longer a death sentence, as they recognize they are living proof of all possibilities. Participants shared with us the time frame of their diagnosis that range from 2 years old to at least, I'm sorry, 2 years, from 2 years from being diagnosed to up to 30 years to being diagnosed. And they talked about the importance of medication and adhering to their medication so that they can have great health. And one participant expressed that, it's not a death sentence. You can live as long as you want with HIV as long as you take your medications every day. And taking, a daily pill was perceived really as a low burden for, as well as going to regular doctor's appointments. And, some of them shared that, people living with HIV, going to their doctor's appointments and being in care gave them a sense of being in charge of their health, and also gave them a new outlook on life. One participant actually said, if I don't take these two little pills every single day, like clockwork for the rest of my life, I can't play, I can't work, I can't love, I can't get to that marriage or to the kids that I want. It's my lifeline, unfortunately. But they fully embraced it and accepted it. But for others, the path of acceptance of HIV diagnosis is not always an easy one. And in fact, it's sometimes very complex for some of the individuals that we actually talk to. And for some, taking the daily medication is a constant trauma and reminder of poor treatment that they've received in medical settings, and just the fear of being exposed. As one participant is quoted as saying, even though medicines can help you live a long time, sometimes because of how you're treated, and how you feel, can make you even consider taking your own life or doing some other hard stuff to cope. And so, that's a very hard message to hear from people. And so, of course, we want to help really decrease that level of pressure that people feel as a result of those who they interact with, or those who sort of place these judgments on them based off of their diagnosis. Next slide, please. And so people living with HIV also discuss both family and peers as sources of support, and in some cases, help them to take their medication like they're supposed to, and eventually become undetectable, meaning that the virus is so low in their bodies that it doesn't show up on any exams, and it's very hard for them to transmit that to anyone else. And that's exactly where scientists want that viral load to be undetectable. Family ties was a strong, proponent that gave people power to deal with the other folks who did not support, them being HIV positive. One participant said, the thing that helped me become undetectable as soon as I did was sticking to my medication regimen. And I had friends that were HIV positive that were also encouraging me. And he said that they were like, it's going to be okay, you'll be fine. And so it was having that camaraderie and family around saying you'll be okay, everything is going to be okay, was a strong support for them. And so, we found that without support from the interpersonal networks, people living with HIV were, sort of able to disclose their status with the support from interpersonal networks. People were able to disclose their status and work toward healthy behaviors to improve overall health outcomes. And although in other scenarios, family members and peers, particularly from those who identified as same gender loving, were less supportive in internalizations of being shamed for their life choices, for who they loved, and they were also blamed for having contracted HIV. But they found support within their same gender loving networks, and it was sometimes conflicting because that same support system could also be a little bit challenging from some of the disagreements that presented for them working together. And so there was a push and there was a plea for those who are in the same gender loving community to begin to work as a more cohesive front. Next slide, please. And so when we look at church as a support and stigma, several participants identified the Black church as a source of support for themselves and for their families. And we know this to be, just part of the fabric of Black church itself. Others wanted to see their churches as supportive, but saw limitations to this happening. We know that the Black church is not a singular experience for people. However, some received support while others wanted it but didn't find it, and others were hurt by the church. And regardless of their experience, many still wanted and held hope that the church could be open and understanding of people's lives. And self-strength or resilience was a source of support for participants, but internalized stigma also manifested amongst participants, and that challenged their ability to protect themselves from stigma. Several participants said they believed that they did something wrong to get HIV, and this caused them to hide it from people. And other participants relied deeply on their internal resources to really drive stigma away or overcome it. And we also know that environments can be a source of support, but it can also present with it, stigma or I would say contribute to stigma. We know that, and we have learned from, just this small study and just from some other readings that stigma is very complex and that many individuals will enact self-protective acts as a backup to help to be able to continue to show up every day and function every day. And so we learned and also know that, structural level changes are definitely needed in order to really help broach this challenge that we see from this internalized stigma. Next slide, please. And that really concludes the bulk of our discussion tonight. We know that, the photo voice intervention empowered people living with HIV to describe how they felt, that internalized stigma that they felt using photographs. And these photos were displayed and revealed, a history of childhood sexual trauma, sexual abuse from clergy, and sometimes intolerance from religious and HIV medical care systems. And in contrast, there were displays of personal growth and self-acceptance of individuals who are living with HIV. So we saw great things, but we also saw where there is great room for, improvement within our faith-based institutions and other medical and community-based institutions that offer support for people who are living with HIV. And we will take questions now, I think, or follow your lead, Ms. Bettina, as you moderate.
Go ahead. We will take questions.
Okay.
We had one in the chat already about bisexual services for bisexual people.
Let me see if I can pull it up. Is there information about the conversation needed for bisexual activity and the risk factors? I probably need a little bit more information about that. Tell me a little bit more about what you're asking specifically.
Whoever put the question in the chat, can you unmute yourself and just kind of briefly explain what you're talking about, please?
I can try.
I believe that was Linda Carper, who's a member of our team, of our Hope Health team. I don't know if Linda's able to unmute, but I think she's looking for ways that the faith-based community can address that in a way that embraces some of the principles that you're teaching us about what people experience when they have AIDS and HIV, but then how a faith-based faith-based community can still address all the other faces of that
Yeah.
particular population.
Typically, I would say the best methodology is to just really follow the science. So we talk about how HIV is prevented, talk about how HIV is spread, really make sure that individuals have a good understanding of how you actually contract HIV. And for those who may be HIV positive, try to stay away from the judgment that sometimes people feel for having any type of diagnosis. For instance, my mother is a 20-year breast cancer survivor, but at the time when she was diagnosed, like so many other Black women or just women in general, she was very embarrassed. She had not done anything to contract that virus, contract breast cancer, but she felt ashamed because it impacted a very intimate part of her body. And she felt like people would, see the disease and not see her. And so we have to, I think, as people who are, compassionate, people who are empathetic, see the individual and not the disease itself. Make sure that individuals understand, how to stay healthy, encourage them to take their medicines, and just go improve overall, health. Period. But I think that message of just encouraging overall better health for everyone and not focusing on the behavior that led them to actually contract it. I think that's when it starts to become more stigmatizing, when you want to focus on, or it's hard sometimes to not focus on the behavior that led to, contracting the virus, but instead just focusing on the disease, how it's transmitted, how it's not transmitted, and how to help someone maintain a healthy life.
I'd like to add that I agree with everything Andrea said, but also having worked with the faith community, I also understand that it is important to keep those core elements that the CDC said that we must have in any intervention when we're working with people who are HIV positive, but there needs to be some flexibility to allow the church and the leadership of whatever faith institution it is to be able to usher that program in based on what their goals are for their congregation. And when we do that, we find that we get great support. Working with the faith communities in Flint, we developed an intervention, and it's called Your Blessed Health. And it has been very successful in working with churches across 9 denominations and being able to provide information and education around HIV for many different types of clients or populations. And so I think that if the church is really willing, the information and the knowledge, again, heavily based on the science. And I caution, because I strictly believe, and after 30 years of working with this, that it's good to have a program for the churches that is abstinence focused and not abstinence only, because we know abstinence only does not work. So having said that, are there any other questions?
I would just like to make a comment. When we talk about the disease, but from the perspective of the church, we have to continue to deal with Trinity wellness. That is body, mind, and spirit. So with the body, you will address the physical part as well, because you're going to be stigma, because many of us want to know, how did you get to that point and what you're going to do about it now. But at the same time, we have to address our brothers and our sisters' physical needs as well, whether it's mentally, physically, or spiritually. And if we take in the fact that we need to be Trinity well, then we'll look at it in a different way.
Amen. Wonderful. We thank you all. Do we have any other questions from our Zoom participants? We thank you, Sister Copper and Pastor Montgomery, for those really great questions. We appreciate that. So I think what I've heard tonight has been some really good information. I want to hit on it just really, really quickly again as I move these screens around. I heard a lot about data. I heard a lot about statistics, but in everything that Dr. Pichon and Ms. Stubbs said, all of that data and all of that statistics led back to people. These are human beings, our brothers and sisters, and we have to treat them as such. Any illness at the end of the day is just an illness that must be treated. And we believe the science, we believe the statistics, we believe in the medications and the drugs, but we also believe God. We know that he's a healer. And then we also know that he wants us to love one another. So those are the things that we've got to focus on when we deal with any illness, but particularly conditions that are stigmatized like HIV and AIDS. Dr. Pichon has shared with us a website that has some information that I think will be helpful to us. And that site is https://end HIV901.org. End HIV, END HIV 901, the Memphis area code.org. She says there's a lot of local information there that will help us as a faith community know how to address these issues as they become more and more prevalent. So ladies, we thank you. We appreciate you for sharing this.
Sister Minor,
Yes.
Nettie Johnson had her hand up. I think she had a comment.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Go ahead, Sister Nettie.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for this presentation. It was very informative and it was also touching. And my question is, has the exhibit been shown in this COVID period where we are and so many churches are virtual? Is it being shown virtually? Have there been any examples where those very touching pictorial stories that really do tell the story so well, it's being shown in a virtual setting with individual churches?
Sister Stubbs or Dr. Pichon, either one of you can address that question.
Can you all hear me?
We can.
Oh,
Yes.
Good. I didn't know if I was still on mute. I was going to say that we are absolutely open and willing to share virtually. We can problem solve and try to make that happen, but that is our goal. We actually have applied for a grant and we should be hearing something very, very soon, but it will allow us to continue to disseminate this work. But I hope I'm not wrong by saying this, but we will still move forward with or without a grant to continue to share this very powerful information from the people we care so much about. And so please reach out to me if you would like for us to do that. We are actually going to be presenting at the Tennessee Department of Health, Public Health HIV conference. It will be the days will be March 2nd through the 4th. And they're actually going to be showing a virtual display of all of our photo voice exhibits. So that's another opportunity. It's a free conference if you all have time. They will be playing the slideshow during lunch, but we also will be presenting this information as well. But yes, we are very open to sharing this in a virtual space since that's where we're at right now.
Dr. Pichon, can we ask that if you would send that information so that we can put it on our website so that people that might want to use that resource can take advantage of it?
Yes, I'm going to put it in the chat if I can find it quickly. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank
you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That is absolutely super information. I think everything that we do needs to be virtual. I mean, there needs to be a virtual option because we don't know how long we'll be in this environment. Something tells me that long after the pandemic is over, we're still going to need more virtual options because we've gotten used to that. All right, again, thank you, ladies, for your information. We thank all of our viewers. We thank those that joined us via Facebook, those that have joined us or will join us via YouTube, as well as those that are with us here tonight on Zoom. So we want to move forward just a little bit and talk about the screen that you see behind me. You see it says www.hop.org. www.joinallofus.org/together. Now, what in the world does that have to do with anything we've talked about tonight? It has everything to do with it, because as we aforementioned, we've talked about data, we've talked about statistics, we've talked about wellness versus not being so well mentally, physically, or spiritually. And it all has kind of come together in talking about people and how we interact and how the household of faith is to address the mind, the body, the spirit. All of us directly relates to data, to statistics, and to people. All of us is a National Institute of Health research initiative program that is working to find 1 million participants from across the country. And they want those participants to be just as diverse as our country is diverse. And the whole idea of it is to help to make medicine more precise. That's why precision medicine is involved. And by being precise, researchers and providers want to find out why some people get sick. Why do some people have, for example, metastatic breast cancer in their family and others don't? Why can some people, I'll give you an example on the genetic side of it. Why do some people love cilantro and others don't? Why can some people roll their tongue and others can't? Those sound like strange examples, but those are things that the All of Us research program looks at to help understand how our bodies function and what providers and researchers can do to help everyone get healthy and stay healthy. This research may not do a thing for those of us who are alive today, but for future generations, folks will have an opportunity to be healthier, to have medicine that is more precise. The program looks at genetics, it looks at culture, it looks at environment, because all of those things go into making us get sick, helping us stay healthy. And they also have a lot to do with the life decisions that we make, which directly impact our health. All of Us has joined in with the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated to help recruit these 1 million participants. They particularly want people who look like us because oftentimes we're the ones who suffer the most from health disparities. We heard Dr. Pichon and we heard Sister Stubbs tonight and Sister Campbell talking about one of those disparities, which is HIV and AIDS. So we encourage everyone to visit this website, www.joinallofus.org/together to get more information and to become a participant. Again, this is not a invasive research program. People can offer as much health information or as little information as they want to. And all of the information is held securely, and folks can withdraw from the program whenever they want to. So again, remember, joinallofus.org, www.joinallofus.org/together. All right, so again, we want to thank our participants. Ladies, you did a fabulous job. We want to thank our moderator, Sister Campbell. We want to acknowledge our HOPE team. I think most of our HOPE team members were present tonight. Our leader, Dr. Michael Miner, myself, Pastor Bernard Montgomery, who you heard from earlier, Sister Bettina Campbell, who was our moderator, Pastor Dexter Moraney, Sister Ellen McKnight, Dr. Felisa Washington, Minister Geraldine Moore, Dr. Desi Levy, Sister Linda Carper, Sister Loretta Miller, Dr. Lavora Williams, Sister Michelle Johnson, and Sister Nettie Johnson. Once again, we want to acknowledge our president of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, Dr. Jerry Young, who reminds us to envision the future exceptionally. This has been a production of the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated, the nation's largest Black denomination. We're going to sign off of Facebook. Facebook viewers, thank you for being here. We'll sign off of YouTube as well. And we'll ask all of our Zoom participants to hold on for just a moment, and so that we can chat for just a little. All right, everyone, thank you so much.